Thanks be to God.
We are
It
amazing.
is right to give him thanks and praise.
Okay.
But it is.
It
is. Always is.
It
It is good and meet at all times and in every place.
Good and neat?
That's what the old version of the Book of Common Prayer says.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. It's meet. M-E-E-T. Yeah, like the moment meets what's appropriate. You know what I mean? Like it's meat. It's good and meat.
M-E-A-T.
No.
I was
E's.
Okay. This is already gone to places I didn't expect it to. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Preaching Lab. My name is Rory, and I'm here with my good friend Andrew. Arndt, Andrew, how was Thanksgiving for you this past week?
It was delightful. I woke up at 4 a.m. I ran 20 miles.
Okay. I don't know why I asked you.
And I was giving thanks to the Lord.
You ran 20 miles on Thanksgiving?
I did 15, and then I was feeling so good that I went for another 5.
Okay. Well, in case you wanted to feel horrible about your personal fitness and health, Andrew Arndt is here to help you out.
You ask. This feels like a penalty for honesty. It is. I really did.
It totally is a penalty for honesty. I should have done it. I'm super excited about this episode. We have a guest on today that I'm just honored who would join us. John, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce your name on a camera. John, actually, yes, I am. We're going to have fun with this. John Onwuchekwa?
Yeah.
John, look at that. I'm nailing it. Look at that. I can read. John is a preacher, a speaker, and a writer who is obsessed with the power of words and ultimately how they help reshape the narratives of our lives. And among being a father and a husband, John is also a church planter, a digital creator, and the co-founder of Portrait Coffee in Atlanta, Georgia. And he is also the director of leadership resources at Christianity Today. I stumbled on this bit of information today, man. John, you are a jack of all trades. Is there anything that you can't do?
Yes. yeah, stay up late. I'm an early riser.
Yes.
So I go to bed like super early.
Like what's early for you?
All right. Normally I'm in bed somewhere between like 9:30 to 10 o'clock every night.
Mm-hmm.
I get up at 4:30 a.m.
Yeah,
I
man,
don't
God's
run
time.
20 miles, right? I'll come back out here. I'll read. I'll go to the gym. I'll do some stuff like that. But every like 6 weeks or so, I just like crash. So this past Tuesday night, it was like, put my daughter to bed at 7. I'm sleeping on the couch. I'm on the couch. 7:30, right? I got a birthday party to go to. It's like, yo, sweetheart, I'm just gonna, close my eyes for half an hour, wake me up so that I can go to the party.
Yeah.
I wake up, it's 1 a.m. All the lights are off on the couch. And it's like, yeah. So every like 6 weeks or so, I go to bed at like when the sun is still out. Right?
Yeah, man.
The sun hasn't set yet, but I'm gone.
That's living right, bro. That's getting ahead of it. I like your style.
John, you truly are. Your life, your career, your work, it covers so much ground. And so this podcast in many ways I think is going to do a similar thing. Preaching is the umbrella we sort of hang out under, but I think we're going to go all sorts of places. John, one of the things that we do on the Preaching Lab is we start with what's called the first 5. And this is really just to get us rolling in some conversation. So the first question that I want to ask you, just to sort of get things flowing here, is do you remember your first time ever preaching?
Yes.
And if so, what happened?
It was at my dad's church. I was, what was this? I was in college or right out of college. No, maybe in college. My senior year was, 21 years old. And, I gave a message and it was, in hindsight, it's like, it was not great, right? But my dad was there and my mom was there. My girlfriend at the time was there and some friends from school. And I remember I preached on John 8. And I think I said some stuff that was generally true about Jesus and the Christian faith. And it was, I look back in hindsight and it was not great. I'm glad that a lot of my development came in a pre-YouTube era. So there's really no footage.
There's no record of it.
Of anything anywhere other than the Word document manuscripts that are encrypted in my Dropbox, so nobody will find
no
those,
one's seen them. So you grew up a pastor's kid.
Yeah.
How much did that play into you wanting to go into the world of ministry to do it? Was that a big part of it, or did it just sort of like
no. Never thought I would be a pastor. Never thought that my life would be shaped by me talking to anybody, right? So I grew up with a terrible stutter. So 0 people in the entire world, right? Not even my mom, right? And your mom thinks that you could do anything. There is nobody in the entire world that would look at me now and say, oh, I absolutely thought that John would do that. Everybody in the entire world is surprised, including myself. I never would have thought public speaking in any capacity would be something that would shape my life.
So take us back to that moment when your dad asked you to preach at 21. What was going on there? Was he like trying to help you confront a fear or trying to call something out of you that he saw? Or were you saying to him, Dad, the word of the Lord is burning in my bones. I got to get it out. What happened there?
So by 21, things had changed for me, right? So the summer after high school, that's where things really changed for me. So this is a very long story short. I'm in Nigeria with my folks. That's where they're from. It's me, my mom, and my dad, my 4 brothers and sisters. I graduate high school. The girl that I'm dating at the time is getting ready to go to this school right outside of Houston. All my friends are going to be there. I'm going to be there. And my life up until this point had been spent on, I'm going to play ball. I'm going to get married at a young age. Like, those are the 2 things that shaped my life. And in Nigeria, the first weekend of July, our family gets robbed at gunpoint on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. Guns pointed to the back of our head. And as we're laying down, right, on the dirt roads in the middle of nowhere, Nigeria, all I could think of was, I think that I've wasted my life, right? Like, I've, played church my whole life. I'm not sure where I'm going to go when I die. And if I were to die right now, what would I have to show for it? Nobody in the world would be better as a result of what, my life. And so at that point, it was just like, all right, God, if you save me, I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing whatever it is that you want me to do to make you known.
Wow.
And so, again, very long story short, just for the sake of time, going to leave a bunch of stuff out. We
like, God save me and yada, yada, yada. And I'm in ministry.
Nobody got hurt. We came back when we should. And it was like a week later, my life changed. It's like, all right, I'm actually going to go to Baylor instead of the school that I was going to go to outside of Houston. Basketball may not be in the cards. I don't know anybody there. So a week later, my dad rented me a PT Cruiser, and I'm staying in a Motel 6 doing orientation at Baylor. And then it was there that my life just radically changed. And so 18 years old, the Lord grabbed a hold of my heart. And from that point, it was like, I just felt like I really I had a burden on the inside, and I felt like the things that the Lord did to change me, I just wanted to get it out.
Yeah.
But again, right, I wasn't a great speaker and felt very insecure. And so I started writing poetry. So spoken word was what I did.
Yeah, you did.
And it was incredible because it was like, when you do that, so, I mean, you just, when you stutter, you learn a whole bunch of stuff about speech and how it's all about breathing and pausing and how you control your words. And there was something about spoken word, right? The melodic nature of it. You can't stutter and sing at the same time. It's 2 different parts of your brain. And so I just did that for years. And that was how I was able to get stuff out. And then that just, it changed the trajectory of my life.
Wow. What a start. I don't think anywhere in the first 5 questions with people we've ever gone into this territory yet. So let me give you a second one real quick, John.
Okay.
You're a coffee aficionado. I'm going to give you a desert island question here. You're on a desert island. It's just you. You can only have one bag of coffee for the rest of your life.
Okay.
Where is this coffee coming from?
Okay. It's coming from a roaster out of Raleigh. So Black and White Roasters. There's this guy, Lem Butler. Once per year, Lem puts out this cinnamon anaerobic. So an anaerobic coffee is one that's fermented in these casks. So it's this real funky way to make coffee. But this one is fermented in these cinnamon casks. So when you make it, like, it tastes like a cinnamon roll in a cup.
Oh my gosh.
Lem puts it out once a year, Black and White Roasters. It's incredible. He's one of my favorite roasters. Lem could charge whatever he wanted to, and I would pay for it when it came out.
Well, I have a feeling after this podcast, the price on it might go up a little bit. He might need to match.
Brought to you by.
Yeah, might need to match supply and demand a little bit.
Right.
Keeping in the preaching world, one of the great things about great communicators is they all have moments where they just fail, they get it wrong. I'm wondering for you, do you have like a most embarrassing preaching moment? Like a moment that sticks with you that you're like, yeah, this was one I was not proud of.
Yeah. So I was in college. I was running a college ministry. So college pastor, my first year. It's great. It's the springtime, so it's the transition before I really take it over. And we did this series called 13 Letters. So we did it with the guys from Reach Records, Lecrae and all them. We would host an evening. They created an album where they would rap through each of the books, and then we would teach through each of the books. So I had Ephesians. So this is my first time, with the crowd. I'm studying. I know the book back and forth. And, it's supposed to be a 45-minute sermon. And so I get up there, my introduction is great. People are laughing and engaged. And I'm like, this is going well. Right? This is going swimmingly. And so I spend time and I go through, and I'm teaching and I just get lost in it. And I'm teaching. And it felt like 15 minutes. And I was like, yo, all right, that's the end of chapter 1. And it's like, I looked up and everybody let out this like collective, not like sigh, but it's like whatever despair sounds like, right?
Yeah.
So despair, exhale. And I looked up at the clock and I'd been talking for 50 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
5-0. And I still had 5 chapters to go through. And so I saw it. And all I thought was, this is not going as well as I thought that it was.
Wow.
So I wrapped up the rest of the book in like 5 minutes, right? It's like, so
it's like the wall's been broken down, and you know about the grace that's given to me, and love each other. Bye.
Salvation, and we're out of there. Thanks for your time, right? So that was one where it was like, I had a friend tell me at the end, like, hey, John, I just want you to know, sermons can be good and long. Sermons can be good and short. Mm-hmm. Sermons can be bad and short. But they're never allowed to be bad and long. So just make sure that they're not bad and long. And that stuck with me for the rest of my life.
Isn't that the occupational hazard of a young preacher?
Oh,
you think that the gold standard is preaching for a long time.
And
then you realize that nobody really wants that. And the much more difficult thing is saying a lot in a short amount of time. Brevity, concise,
Yeah. That's it.
What a good start. John, you are you're an avid reader. I know this about you, following you on social media. I'm curious, if you could think back across 2023, what has been the book that has been the most profound for you this year?
There's 3.
Okay, go.
Heavy by Kiese Lehman. It's a memoir. Such an incredible book. I think the thing I take away from that book is that the things about your life that you most want to forget are the things that make your story absolutely unforgettable. Fantastic. I've never read writing like his. It was great. Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Adichie. It's a book about historical fiction about a civil war that took place in Nigeria that, it's crazy. Most of the world has no clue about. Nigeria, most people don't know, is a country of 200 million people. So it's 2/3 of the size of the U.S. And while the United States was fighting for civil rights, there was a country fighting a civil war at the same time. And the story has not been told at all. And she is, one of my top 2 favorite authors. She wrote an incredible book that just, helped me gain so much insight about that, which helped me in turn learn so much about, my parents who lived through that war. And then lastly, Francis Waller has this book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And it is this book that's about grief. And what I love most about the book is that he talks about the gates of grief. So not grief being a journey. We think stages, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm done. He's like, no. Grief is actually an invitation into an ongoing conversation. So he reframes how we think through grief. And so it's just shaped a whole lot of my life and the things that I do. But as I think about 2023, those are 3 books that fall into my top 10 books of all time that all of them have changed my life in a unique way.
Wow. We're going to come back to the topic of grief here in a second. I have one last question for you. This is going to mean nothing to everyone in the room. You are actually breaking a tie of an argument that is happening outside of this podcast between me and some of our worship pastors.
Happy to be the deciding vote.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really just need somebody to back me up on this. We were having a conversation the other night, and this is for you because you're from Atlanta and I know you love hip hop. Andre 3000, is he a top 5 MC of all time?
100%.
There we go.
Undisputed. That shouldn't even be a question. As certain as the sun rises in the morning, as sure as water is wet, Andre Benjamin is a top 5 MC on everybody's list.
This is beautiful. Thank you.
Way to use the bully pulpit, Rory.
Yeah, listen. I would never do it on a stage, but on a podcast, I would prove a point. Jono, you have done a ton of work around the idea of grief. You wrote a book about it last year. You've been are you still on a tour, sort of having these conversations, or did the tour just wrap up?
Yeah. Just wrapped up.
So talk a little bit, maybe to help us get into this, because I want to talk about just the work you're doing around it. What was that tour like for you guys? And just explain it for some of our listeners who don't know what it is.
So it's hard, right? 2 things were standard. So we did this tour in 13 cities over 27 days from the East Coast to the West Coast. So we were from Brooklyn to LA, across the Midwest, Texas, and venues of about 300 folks each night, packed and sold out, 2 hours of, being able to work through grief. And everybody would say this. I had no clue what to expect when I came in, and I've never been to anything like it. In every city, the audiences were probably somewhere from maybe 25% in some cities, up to like 40% in other cities, non-Christian, right?
Wow.
So it was just this diverse group of folks that came in to hear about grief, and so it's I'll explain a little bit about the work that we were trying to do on grief, and then I'll talk about what the nights looked like. So, my brother died in 2015, 6 weeks before we started our last church. I heard all the stuff about grief, but it was different when you actually felt it, right? C.S. Lewis is going to say it in his book, A Grief Observed, right? Like we tend to think that our faith is a strong temple, but we realize like when grief hits it, it's really nothing more than a house of cards, right? And so I felt that. And after a year, you know, I'm pastoring and I find myself in a parking lot in Atlanta on my way to take back some shoes, thinking that I'm done with my grief. Just got done preaching to the Texas A&M men's basketball team about grief and hope and all that. And I find myself in a parking lot cussing out a group of kids that took my parking spot.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, yo, something is not right. Like, I'm not okay. So I call my wife and two of my best friends at the time to help me plant the church. And I say, yo, I'm not okay. And they're like, oh, yeah, we know that you're not okay.
Hey, are you just catching up?
Yeah. We've just been waiting on you to say that you're not okay. Wow. And that was when I first was like, oh, maybe grief doesn't end as quickly as I thought that it did, right? I found as time went on that it was like, I'm 8.5 years in. And what I've learned is that, grief actually doesn't have an expiration date, right? It's like a non-perishable food item, right? The can of beans that's been sitting at the back of your granny's pantry since World War II, right? You pop it open and it's just as fresh as the day it was put in. And so it was like, all right, if grief doesn't have a finish line, then maybe it's not helpful to think of it as a journey. Maybe it's more helpful to think of it as a language, right? Francis Waller, in that book that I talked to you about, what he said is, grief is an invitation into an ongoing conversation. And the conversation begins with this one truth. Everything in this world that you love, you will lose.
Yeah.
That's gravity. Don't argue with it. It doesn't really matter how it makes you feel. That's the conversation that grief brings you into. And but that's not meant to make you sad. It's meant to make you sober. It's meant to remind you that, no, the moments you have with your daughter are as precious as they are fragile. You're going to lose that. So instead of your phone being buried, or instead of your nose being buried in your phone, nestle that, nose in your daughter. And so if grief is a language, then the best way to learn a language is not in a classroom. The best way to learn it is by immersion.
Wow.
You learn it through the stories of a culture, the films of a culture, the music. So what we've done is I wrote the book, and you've got my book, and I crafted it where it feels more like a journey and an experience. It's artful. There's pictures, there's all of that stuff on the inside. So we crafted these evenings to be this immersive experience in grief. So it was, I've got a good friend of mine, and after we did the book, he's a Grammy-nominated artist, does hip-hop, and so we put together an album. I neither sing nor rap, but I love word music, so I'm the executive director or producer on it. So we crafted that. So he did that throughout the course of the night. I got a good friend, Rich Perez, former pastor. He's done film stuff. So there was film, storytelling. And so the first part of the night was like that. We had an intermission. And then on the tail end, I've got a friend that's a professional comedian. And when the tension in the room was hard, David did this incredible 10-minute set. And you had people, right, with tear-stained cheeks, laughing And then we came back up and had a panel where we sat and talked. And one of the things that I shared with the group is, the crazy thing about grief is that if your life was a restaurant, grief would convince you that it has a standing reservation at every table, and that joy can't sit down and laughter can't sit down. But for 12 minutes, you were reminded that you were a complex soul, and that laughter shouldn't be quarantined,
right,
just for the good times. And so it was an evening that we talked about the most pleasant experience you'll ever have with grief, and learning the different dialects of grief.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go.
Yes.
Here's what's amazing to me, John, is that we have to craft moments like that in neutral spaces for people to come together and have an experience, a language experience that teaches them and allows them to grieve well.
Yep.
Why are we not doing this in church? Like, how come our sermons are not places where that is happening for people?
Come on. So I am glad that you asked this. So, the funny thing is, I'll tell you this one story. This is maybe 3 weeks ago. We're in Brooklyn having lunch the night before our Brooklyn show, Saturday night. Atlanta, our last stop, is 2 weeks ago from today. I get an email while we're at lunch, right? It's this Italian restaurant. Our food just comes out, right? And I have my phone up here and I scroll through, and it's this girl that says, "Yo, I bought my tickets. I'm so excited. I was so excited to come to the show." And she's like, "But then I found out from my friends," and these were her words, "that it was a Christian event. And I want a refund. I want my money back. I'm not interested in coming at all." I reply to her and I say, "Yo, listen, I'll give you a refund, but I'll also give you a code to get a free ticket." While everybody up here is a person of faith, the subject of conversation is grief. So we want to have a uniquely human conversation that deals with something that doesn't discriminate based on religion, creed, gender, orientation. And I'd love for you to come. And if at the end of the day, this isn't what you hoped that it would be, then all that it cost you was your time. And even that response, she had replied back and said, "No, thank you for that. I'm still going to come."
Wow.
After the event, she was like, "This was incredible. Thank you." And so it was interesting throughout the course of this to have people that come and they're like, "Oh, no, listen." Like, folks would come and they're like, "Oh, no. I had no clue who none of y'all were. I saw a Facebook ad at 3 a.m. and I lost my mom 3 weeks ago and this looked cool. So I bought a ticket and I came." And they're like, "I never expected to get answers or to find hope through what it was that y'all said. Can you tell me more? Can we talk more?" And I think one of the reasons why we wanted to craft this space outside of the church is because when it comes to grief, grief is like open-ended. There's no tight closure to it, right?
And are you saying that in the church part of the reason we can't do it is that we tend to force closure?
We tend to rush people
because we're an Easter people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you can be dead for a second, but you can't be dead too long.
No,
listen, and so we're trying to microwave people to the end of the process rather than, I do love you talking about, like, it's not so much a journey, it's like learning the language of it. Like, that's a different experience of it. And we're not very conversant with that language in the church. No. We think the process is pretty linear.
Yeah, so we try to rush people towards hope. So my good friend Rich that was on the tour, Rich says all the time, probably what makes this hard with faith communities is that we're so uncomfortable with just waiting and pain that when people talk about like doubt, we say, yeah, doubt, but faith, right? When folks talk about grief, it's like, oh, yeah, grief, but joy. And it's no, I get that. But I think if we rush people past their pain, we dishonor the immense dignity that that should be given to the thing that they lost. Right.
I'm curious, as you were sort of preparing this, because it's interesting, right? You're doing these with primarily non-Christian audiences and non-Christian spaces, but in so many ways, you've alluded to this. You were having church, right? This was church.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what you learned about communicating, whether it's about grief or just in general, as you stood in those spaces each night, as you thought about content for it. What were some of the things that were like surprising to you, or even like shifts of the way you thought about, here's how we're communicating content?
Yeah. So when I thought about the conclusion to the night, right? And this is the type of thing where, 13 cities, somewhere between 200 and 300 folks at each night. We concluded each one. I gave a 3-minute spiel just about 2 years apart. My brother died April 14th, 2015. April 14th, 2017. My daughter was a few days old, born premature, was in the NICU, in an incubator, on a breathing machine. And 2 years after my brother died, it was a Good Friday, I got to hold my daughter for the hour that she could be out of the incubator because I had to drive back and preach that night. So as I hold her, I'm, crying. And all I could think about was that my brother died so quick that by the time I got the news, there wasn't time for me to even protest or ask God to like change things. He was just snatched the last breath. And so I'm sitting there with my daughter. And when I tell you, like, the doctor comes and snatches her out of my hands, and before I have a chance to turn around and protest, he places her back in my hands, but she's lighter. And he just says in my ears, today's the first day that she's going to breathe on her own, that he took the breathing machine out 2 years to the day my brother took his last breath on a Good Friday. So I'm already thinking about death and the hope of resurrection and patience and waiting. And so it was like, I just learned the value of patience when it comes to enduring grief, right? Those 2 years, April 14th was hell for me. And then in an instant, my brother didn't come back, but I was reminded that, death and life, grief and hope are not these parallel streets. They intersect. We can stand at both at the same time. And so I end off each night and I just tell the group, yo, listen, like one of the things we said throughout the course of the nights was this, learning a language begins with mastering one phrase, right? And the phrase that was going to guide us through the night was this, tragedy doesn't ruin anybody. Hopelessness does.
Yes, it does. That's
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm not trying to preach to y'all right now. I was a preacher for 16 years and I wrapped up each thing with this like nice bow. And I'm just trying to share with you that when I talk about hope, hope for me is pregnant, right? That as a Christian, as a person of faith, the center of my faith is not rules, it's not ideologies, it is an event, resurrection. It is saying everybody finds themselves at the introduction of a conversation, right? That everything in this world you love, you will lose. And what the Christian faith does for me is that it's built on a man who came into the world, God in the flesh, and said, hey, that may be a complete statement, but it's not a complete thought. I would like to add to that. All that you love, you will lose, but there is a way to gain back more than you have ever lost. And the resurrection is about a hope and a future, a place where grief, right, can't touch. And that's why I stopped. Cool. I don't know where it is that you put your hope, but all that I'm saying is that if you're ever going to work through grief, you've got to have a hope that can go further than 6 feet deep.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your time. Glad this was just the first step in a journey, and we're done, right? And I don't feel the pressure or the need to define a successful night as everybody in the crowd being converted. That for me, it's just, no, listen, I'm introducing people to the source of my hope. And after the shows, right, we spend an hour with people saying, tell me more.
But isn't that what preaching is? I mean, preaching is not, we're not trying to seal the deal or clinch. We're trying to bear witness and create a space for the Holy Spirit to act. John, you were telling us before we started recording, you know, you preached for 16 years. You're in a bit of a sort of a almost like a sabbatical moment where you're giving your attention to other things, but you just came off this speaking tour.
Yeah.
Where you're leading people in an experience of the language of grief and creating an invitational moment for them. How much has this experience, how much is it reshaping your vision for what the pulpit could mean, for what the preaching moment could mean? Because I assume that you'll step back into it in a more robust way down the road. Yeah. How is this reshaping your imagination?
Yeah. So, you know, for me, what I've learned is that I've stepped away from pastoring with no thought of going back, but I haven't stepped away from preaching, right? I preached in my church this past week. I'm preaching for a friend in New York 2 days from now, and then I'll be preaching back in my church next week. I'm going to preach for as long as I live.
Yeah.
I think what the course of this past year has taught me is really, for me, like the importance of story and storytelling when it comes to the way that we preach, right? I just feel like what stories do in their form and their function is part of the aim of a story is to cultivate the virtue of patience, right? Propositions are, let's get you to the truth as quick as you can. Yeah. Slow and steady wins the race. Get it, embrace it, be patient. Stories say this, once upon a time, there was a tortoise and a hare. And you've got to wait for me to finish before you understand what I'm saying. But as I tell that story gives you handlebars to internalize, to process, to be able to come back to it, to retell. And so I think this past year, especially the stuff with grief, has just helped me see that we just live in a very impatient world.
Yeah.
We live in a world that's impatient when it comes to folks' faith journeys, their grief journeys, their transformations. And I think the beauty of making stories central in what we do is that we give folks space to process or to feel like, all right, I can make sense of things. I can wait. I can ask questions. I can sit. I can soak. I don't have to be in a rush to get past, my pain or past my feelings, past my thoughts.
John, I'm recognizing something that is so obvious, but it's just like clicking to me as we're talking. Your first like sort of bout with grief happens when your brother passes, as you're planting a church, as you're actively pastoring, as you're actively preaching.
Yes.
What is grief like for the guy who has to stand on a platform and talk about things? Because I don't know that grief is somehow different, but what was going through you as those things are happening? Did you feel like you had to like hide within yourself? Did you have to protect John? Like, you have this moment where you call your friends and are like, hey, something's up with me. Yeah. But what was going on in between those spaces for you?
I was crying from the pulpit repeatedly, right? Mm-hmm. So it was like, it wasn't a mystery to anybody else in our church that I wasn't okay, right? Mm-hmm. Grief was hard, but it was also grief for the person that stands in front, right? Was an easy way for me to hide my unhealth, right? So it was like I was not okay. And I think I subtly convinced myself that part of getting better was me helping everybody else get their life together. And so if I could just put the pieces together of everybody else's life, then somehow vicariously I'd also put my own life back together. And that's actually not how things work.
No.
At all, right? So ministry for me was really, at least at parts of that time, it was a great hiding place for my own unhealth, because people would be helped by things that I said.
And because they were helped, you would think that you had gotten helped. Yeah. That must be good.
Absolutely.
No, right. Man, you're still bleeding. You're still bleeding all over the place.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, man. You then make this decision unrelated to the grief, but in 2018, is 2018 when you stepped down from being a pastor? Or is it 2020?
No.
This
2022.
Year?
2022. Yeah. Okay, so like 5 minutes ago. Got it.
You're right.
So in 2022, you stepped down from being a pastor. We said we wanted to sort of talk about this a little bit. What has the experience been for you, being the guy who still preaches at this church that you helped found, are still very much a congregation member? What has that experience been like for you?
It's been clarifying. It's been confusing, right? It's been all of the above. So when I stepped down, one of the first things that I did was we had meetings with folks at the church. And I believe in candor. It's like, let's just be upfront and everybody will be better. So there was this one meeting where somebody was like, yo, how do we relate to you now, right? Like, we really wanted to get time with you as a pastor, and now you're gone. So how should we relate to you? And we're sitting there in that room, and I share, it's like, hey, this may sound cold because I've thought about it. All right. So it's if you and I were to walk in the mall and you meet or you see a friend that you hadn't seen in years, and y'all start to talk and they say, oh, who's this? And you would introduce me as, this is John, this is my pastor. Then what I want you to know is that pastor parishioner relationship, that's where the majority of our relational ties are. Now, it's not a bad thing. I just want you to know that after December 31st, 2022, those relational ties are going to be cut. And if we don't have any other relational ties that hold us together, then we have essentially lost a relationship. And we need to mourn that loss. Yeah. But we need to build it back up, right?
So the new conversation would be like, this is John. He used to be my pastor, and we're figuring it out now.
Yeah. And it was just if you would introduce me as your friend, and it's different. And I just shared, hey, for the past 16 years, and people don't know, like, you don't know this unless you're a pastor, is that not just my family, but my friends, they've gotten less of me as the church has gotten more of me. Like, I get up out of birthday dinners and, sorry, I got to take this call. I get up out of times that we hang, sorry, I've got to go to this meeting. And now for this next season, things are actually going to switch. And from a church standpoint, y'all are actually going to get less of me as my friends and family get more of me. And I think that that's only right and fair.
Okay, I got a question for you, John. Some pastors leave too early.
Yeah.
They encounter resistance, disappointment, frustration, fatigue, and they duck out. And we're seeing that happening at an alarming rate in the church. Some pastors stay way too long. They've hit their expiration date. Everybody else knows it. They don't know it. And the food spoils. That ministry starts to stink.
Yeah.
So how do you know? How did you know that it was the right time to step away?
I started having conversations in 2019. And so for me, it was, the church was growing and I realized I was discontent. Um, Discontent because I realized like I started to learn more about me, and it's like I am there's two things that have been true about me my whole life. I love to create things, and I love to gather the resources that are needed to bring that thing to life. And so I tell folks all the time, like, I learned, oh, I'm a great team builder. I'm not a great team leader, right? So it's like the organization started to get to this size, and the more I took an assessment of myself. I brought in trusted friends and family to speak into it, and I brought in people who I felt like loved me, or they valued me more as a person than they did as their pastor. The interesting thing is that if you bring in a lot of people who value you more as a pastor, and they could be well-meaning, I had folks up until the end say, man, I just think this is all about perseverance and you need to go on. And it's like, oh, I get it. You don't want to lose your pastor.
Yeah.
But this isn't
about
that,
him.
right?
It's not about the good of the church. It's about you.
Yeah.
I think, John, there's a lot of pastors, not just pastors, but people, preachers, whatever, who have a similar experience that you do. They're great at the building thing. They like launching new stuff. They like creating new things. But they find themselves often, if they stay in a space for too long, they start to get antsy. They want to start doing something. What would be your advice to some of those people who are starting to feel like the early yearnings of those things, but don't know what to do with it?
Yeah. So I'd say two things. One, have honest conversations. And for folks to know that it's like, yo, all that entrepreneurial energy doesn't need to be stuffed into the role of a pastor, right? Like so it was in 2020, while I was still a full-time pastor in a pandemic, we started a coffee company that, right, last year Food and Wine said, hey, this is one of the top 50 in the US. So it's in Target, Whole Foods. It grew. But it was like my role in it, I was not running the day-to-day at all. Like it was so many times folks think, well, I don't want to do that because it's going to take too much time. I had to talk with my partners, and it's like, yo, I'm still a full-time pastor. So it's like, there's ways that I want to be involved, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a team that can run this thing on its own and let me input what I can input. But it's like, yo, I want to own a business. I don't want to buy myself a job. I have a job. And so what I would say is there's other ways to build that are fine. But two, I also think a lot of the issue isn't on the pastors or the people that are trying to make the decision. It's on a culture that we've created that doesn't allow for honorable discharge for the pastorate. It's like you're only respected if you die on the battlefield.
Right.
Right? Like you've got to retire or die. And that's why the predominant responses that we see are people die, people retire, or people morally fail.
Their life imploded.
Whereas it's like like if somebody was in the army and they did 2 back-to-back tours in Iraq And they came back and said, hey, y'all spent 8 years. Yeah. Hey, man, I think that I'm done. Everybody would say, of course you are. Like that was tough. And life is about seasons. But if you're a pastor, and me, I was a pastor for 16 years. And I'm telling you, when I stepped away, and it's like, no, me and my wife are good. No, it's just been me and her. No, I don't have any scandals. No, look, all the money is where it's been.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, I've been underpaid
Yeah, that's
for my
right.
whole time, right? But it was like, when I tell you, and this was the craziest thing for me, that I left, and this is legitimately the only time in my life that this has happened in 16 years. Speaking engagements canceled, and it's like, I thought that we were good.
I thought we had an arrangement that you were asking me to come and speak for you, and I would leave this thing.
Oh, wow.
But I come to find out at the end, it's like, well, we don't know what really happened. And it's like, so it was this type of thing, because they're like, no, nobody just
People
leaves
don't do that
when things are there, or they don't leave and go somewhere else. I mean, the Christianity Today thing popped up out of nowhere. Like when I left, it's oh, no. I actually don't have any clue what I'm going to do, but I've got money saved up and I've got time to think. And so I'll speak and I'll write and I'll create and I'll pull things from here and there. So I actually left because it's like, oh no, it would be easy for me to coast and just pull a check from the church for the next year while I think this out. But I was clear that, this is what God would have me to do and have us to do. And I trust that he'll take care of us. And when you leave like that, what I've learned is that culturally, there's just not a category for that. And so I do think we have to change the narrative surrounding that, because I will tell you, after I left, after my buddy Rich Perez left, I had a whole lot of Nicodemuses come to me, right, in my DMs, right, at night, saying, yo, can you really just leave like that?
Yeah.
And it was like, shocking. I mean, to this day, me and Rich probably get hit up at least once a month from somebody that's like, hey, man, I think I'm starting to feel it, but I don't know if it's okay. I don't know what folks will think. And I really think
the good thing was you worked through a long process of it.
Right.
You didn't just kind of cook on it on your own and then make an announcement. And that's why it's working.
Right.
Because people were invited into it.
Right.
And so it's deeply relational. So you've done it in a way that most people don't do. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Man, Jono, your story is incredible, and the work that you're doing is brilliant. I like to give everyone who we bring on as a guest an opportunity as we wrap up an episode. We have pastors, preachers, older, younger, that listen to this. You're still very much a pastor at heart. You can see it, you can hear it. So, if you could give one encouraging, challenging, prophetic, convicting, encouraging word to the folks that are listening right now, what would that be?
Yeah. I think one of the words that I would give to the people that are pastoring or preaching, especially the younger pastors, is Mark Dever said this to me a decade ago when I went and spent some time with him. He was like, yo, John, I always wanted both the church and my family to be keenly aware of the fact that I wholeheartedly believe that the church can get another pastor. My wife can't get another husband. My kids can't get another father. And so if at any point there becomes this kind of tug of war, I just want you to know what side I'm going to be pulling on. Right. And I just think that just for people to know, like, yo, like, love God's church and serve God's church. But I would say, honor the gift of family. Make sure they're priority. And two, remember that life is seasonal, right? Everybody's pastoral stint is seasonal. So for me, it's what made the decision easier to do is I never made any statements about what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Maybe God will call me back, maybe not. But all that I'm sure of is for this season, I'm not called to pastor. Things may change. And then if things change, you don't have to be as concerned about, but I already said that I was never going to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's just seasonal. Live your life seasonally.
That's really good.
John, thank you so much for being on here. This was a gift of a conversation. We'll put links in the show notes to all of John's work and what he's got going on, to the book as well, so that people can find you there. Thank you guys so much for joining us on another episode of Preaching Lab. We'll see you next time.